Have you ever noticed how the person who hurt you might have already moved on, while you're still carrying the weight of what they did? You replay the words, the moment, the betrayal, again and again, and each time it feels just as real as the first. You tell yourself, "I've forgiven them." But deep inside, something still tightens, something still refuses to let go. And here's the paradox no one talks about. The person you refuse to forgive isn't the one in prison. You are. Because unforgiveness doesn't just hold someone else accountable, it quietly locks your own heart in chains. But what if letting go isn't about saying what they did was okay? What if it's something much deeper and much harder? Most people don't understand this, because forgiveness feels like loss, like surrender, like injustice. So we hold on, we justify it, we protect it. But what if the very thing you're holding on to is the thing that's destroying your peace? And what if freedom, real freedom, only begins the moment you finally release it? Think about that. There was a king who decided it was time to settle accounts with his servants. One by one, they were brought before him. Then a man was led in, one who owed an overwhelming debt. The amount was beyond anything he could ever repay in a lifetime. The king gave the order. Since the man could not pay, he, his wife, his children, and all he had were to be sold. In that moment, everything collapsed. The servant fell to the ground before the king, trembling. "Be patient with me," he cried. "Give me time, and I will repay everything." His voice shook. His future was gone. His family stood on the edge of being taken from him. The king looked at him, at his fear, his desperation, his helplessness, and something changed. Instead of enforcing the judgment, the king chose compassion. He cancelled the entire debt, not part of it, not a delay, all of it. Then he released the man. The servant walked away, free, no chains, no sentence, no burden. But as he went out, he saw another servant, someone who owed him a small amount in comparison. He went straight to him and seized him. Grabbing him by the throat, he said, "Pay me what you owe." The man collapsed to his knees, pleading, "Be patient with me, and I will repay you." The words echoed the same plea, the same posture, the same desperation. But this time, there was no mercy. The first servant refused. Instead, he had the man thrown into prison until the debt could be paid. Others saw what had happened. They watched the entire scene unfold, the release, the encounter, the cruelty. And they were deeply troubled. They went and reported everything to the king. Then the king called the first servant back. He stood again in the same place where he had once begged for mercy. "You wicked servant," the king said. "I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me." The words hung heavy in the air. "Should you not have had mercy on your fellow servant, as I had mercy on you?" There was no answer. The king's mercy had been met with hardness, and the freedom he had been given was now gone. In anger, the king handed him over to be imprisoned until all his debt was paid. Jesus teaches that those who have received great mercy must extend that same mercy to others. 1. The king cancelling the debt. In the parable, Jesus shows a king who forgives an enormous, impossible debt. He is revealing what God's mercy looks like: undeserved, complete, and given freely. Jesus tells this to show how great the forgiveness is that a person receives from God, far beyond what they could ever repay. In life, many people underestimate how much they have been forgiven, by God or even by others. Because they don't feel the weight of their own debt, they also struggle to show mercy. When someone minimizes what they've received, they become harder, less compassionate, and quicker to judge. 2. The servant's desperation. In the story, the servant falls on his knees and begs for patience. Jesus highlights this moment to show the state of a person who realizes their need. Humble, broken, aware that they cannot fix everything on their own. This is the posture that opens the door to mercy. Today, people often avoid this kind of honesty. They don't want to admit weakness, failure, or need. But internally, they carry anxiety, guilt, or pressure. And here is the tension. Without recognizing our own need for grace, we rarely become people who can give grace. Pride blocks both receiving and giving. 3. The sudden shift. After freedom, Jesus makes a sharp contrast. The same servant who was just forgiven walks out and immediately demands payment from someone else. This is intentional. Jesus is exposing how quickly a person can forget mercy once they are no longer in pain. In real life, this happens more often than people realize. Someone goes through a difficult season, receives help, understanding, or forgiveness, but later becomes strict, cold, or unforgiving toward others. It's as if the memory of their own struggle fades, and with it, their compassion disappears. And this is where the inner contradiction begins. 4. The small debt compared to the large one. In the parable, Jesus intentionally contrasts two debts, one massive and impossible to repay, and another small and manageable. He is showing that the offenses committed against us are real, but they are not comparable to the forgiveness we have received from God. In life, people often magnify what others have done to them while minimizing their own faults. The hurt feels big, personal, unforgettable. But this perspective creates imbalance. When someone focuses only on what they've suffered, they lose the ability to see the bigger picture, and forgiveness begins to feel impossible. 5. The lack of mercy, despite receiving gratia. Jesus highlights a shocking moment. The servant who was forgiven refuses to forgive. This is not just inconsistency, it is a contradiction of the mercy he received. Jesus teaches that true forgiveness from God is meant to transform a person's heart and behavior. In reality, many people accept grace but don't let it change them. They receive kindness, patience, second chances, but still remain harsh toward others. It shows that forgiveness was received externally, but never fully understood internally. And this creates a divided heart, one that wants mercy, but cannot give it. 6. The reaction of the other servants. In the story, the other servants are deeply disturbed when they see what happened. Jesus includes this detail to show that injustice and lack of mercy are visible. They affect not just individuals, but everyone around them. In everyday life, unforgiveness rarely stays private. It spreads through tone, attitude, relationships. People notice bitterness, tension, coldness. It can damage trust, break connections, and create an atmosphere of heaviness. Even if someone thinks, "This is just between me and them," the impact often reaches much further. 7. The king's response. When the king hears what happened, he calls the servant back and confronts him. Jesus shows that the issue is not just the original debt, but the servant's refusal to reflect the mercy he received. The king expected that forgiveness would lead to changed behavior. In life, people often separate what they believe from how they act. They may think they understand forgiveness, but their actions reveal something else. This creates internal tension, because deep down, a person knows when they are holding on to something they were never meant to carry. And that tension quietly steals peace. 8. Being called wicked. In the parable, the king calls the servant wicked, not because of the original debt, but because he refused to show mercy after receiving it. Jesus is emphasizing that the real issue is not failure. It is a hardened heart that refuses to reflect God's mercy. In life, people often think wrongdoing is only about actions. But Jesus points deeper, to the condition of the heart. A person can appear right on the outside, but inside hold resentment, bitterness, and refusal to forgive. And this inner state slowly shapes who they become, even if no one else sees it immediately. 9. The expectation to mirror. Mercy Jesus makes it clear, "Shouldn't you have had mercy as I had on you?" This shows that forgiveness is not just something to receive, it is something to pass on. The mercy of God is meant to flow through a person, not stop with them. In real life, many people treat forgiveness as a personal benefit, not a responsibility. They want peace, release, healing. But when it comes to extending that same grace, they hesitate. And here is where many get stuck. They want the result of mercy, but resist becoming a person who gives it. 10. Losing the freedom that was given. In the story, the servant was set free, but later loses that freedom. Jesus is showing that forgiveness was given, but the servant's actions revealed that he did not live in alignment with it. The freedom was real, but it was not sustained. In life, people can experience moments of peace, release, even spiritual clarity, but still return to old patterns. Holding on to offense brings back emotional weight, tension, and inner conflict. It feels like being free one moment and trapped the next. Not because freedom wasn't given, but because it wasn't embraced fully. 11. Being handed over to the consequences. At the end of the parable, the servant is handed over to imprisonment until his debt is paid. Jesus uses strong imagery to show that unforgiveness has consequences, not as arbitrary punishment, but as the natural result of refusing mercy. In real life, unforgiveness often turns inward. It becomes stress, anxiety, emotional heaviness, even physical tension. A person may think they are holding on to justice, but in reality, they are carrying a burden that affects their peace, relationships, and inner stability. And many don't realize how heavy it has become until they finally let it go. And here is where everything comes together. The servant thought forgiveness was the end of the story, but Jesus shows it was only the beginning, because mercy was never meant to stop with him. It was meant to flow through him. And this is where most people miss it. We hold on to what was done to us. We replay it. We justify it. We say, they don't deserve forgiveness. But neither did we. Think about that. Jesus is not saying that what happened to you was small. He is showing something deeper, that holding on to it will cost you more than it ever cost them. Because unforgiveness doesn't protect your heart. It hardens it. It doesn't give you control. It quietly takes your peace. And here is the truth most people don't want to face. You can be forgiven and still live like a prisoner. So the question is not, do they deserve it? The real question is, do you want to be free? Because freedom doesn't begin when they change. It begins when you finally let go.